Welcome all the chambers that are joined with us, co-branded with us. I'm going to read them out and I'll be as quick as I can. AmCham, OSCham, Belu Thai, CanCham, EABC, FTCC, ITCC, GTCC, NTCC and STCC. A lot of CCs in there. Welcome to this event. I hope you enjoy it and I hope you get some useful information from it. Can I, before I start, ask you, it's pointless asking you to switch them off because nobody ever does these days, but it would be helpful if you could switch them to silent so that we don't get disturbed by a lot of ringtones and so on. If you do have an urgent call, there's the door. Right. Today we're talking about the, I have to take my glasses off, the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, AFAS, which was signed on the 15th of December 1995 by the ASEAN Economic Ministers. We have with us today, this is Auramon Subthaweethum, I hope I got that right, and if I didn't, I'm sorry, who started her career working as a trade negotiator some years ago, and an economist at the Department of Business Economics, currently called the Department of Trade Negotiations. But she's here with us today in her role as Director General of the Department for Trade Negotiations. Now, I've got a long CV here, which tells you all of her achievements going back for many years, not too many years, but going back for all through her career. I'm not going to read that out because I assume that most of you who are interested in that will have read it on the website already. You won't need me to spend 5 minutes going through it, and it would take at least 5 minutes because there are a heck of a lot of achievements in there. So, without further ado, I'm going to invite you to sit back, enjoy your dessert, and listen with the rest of us to Mrs. Auramon from the Director General of the Department for Trade Negotiations. Please give her a round of applause. Okay. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sawadee Chris Thatcher, Chairman of British Chamber of Commerce, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I also would like to try not to read from my note, but sometimes I will have to refer to it because I may have to quote some number. First of all, let me express my appreciation for inviting me to these luncheons. So I would like to thank British Chamber of Commerce and Multi-Chamber of Commerce for this invitation. Before I proceed with the topic of this today talk, I would like to perhaps share with you some of my information regarding ASEAN, because Thailand is a chairmanship of ASEAN this year. So I would like to begin how important of ASEAN to Thailand. ASEAN is Thailand's largest trading partner. It considered a huge market for Thailand, with the GDP of around 2.8 trillion US dollar and over 600 million population. In last year, 2018, Thailand trade with ASEAN is considered 1/5 of our trade with the global. And the growth is around 13%. So the total trade of Thailand with ASEAN is around 130 billion US dollar. Since the establishment of ASEAN in 1967, you may already heard that we have done a number of liberalizations, market access in goods, in services, and investment in ASEAN. But beyond that, ASEAN members also work together to try to improve rules and regulations among the 10 member states. We also try to promote transparency of rules and regulation among ASEAN. In this, if you want to look through if you want to see the laws and regulations of the 10 ASEAN members, you can turn on the web page. We have gathered the data in the ASEAN Trades repository, and it's called ATR. So if you can, just turn on the website on that. Regarding the Thailand chairmanship, can you change to this year? We have tried to promote the theme of ASEAN this year, which is advancing partnership for sustainability. Last year, when Singapore shared ASEAN, Singapore theme is the resilient and innovation. But for Thailand, we proposed the theme of advancing partnership for sustainability. This can be divided into 3 pillars. The first pillar, this is under economic pillars. As Thailand is organizing ASEAN meeting this year, there's going to be around 180 meetings in Thailand. But Ministry of Commerce and my department, we take care of economic pillars. So my department is going to host around 12 meetings this year, ranging from various levels, ranging from senior official level, which we call SIOM, permanent secretary level, and ASEAN Economic Minister meeting. Under economic pillars, we also propose, 13 deliverable issues under Thailand chairmanships this year. So we hope that we can achieve all these 13 issues by the end of this year. By November this year, when we hand over our chairmanship to Vietnam. The chairmanship of ASEAN is rotated according to alphabetical number in English. So we take over from Singapore, and the end of this year we will hand over it to Vietnam. The first pillar is advancing, how to prepare ASEAN member states for the future issues that's coming. And we believe that the fourth industrial revolution is the one important issue that ASEAN have to prepare ourselves for. Under the first issue, ASEAN Digital Integration Framework, last year when Singapore shared the ASEAN meeting, the ASEAN has managed to come up with the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework because we believe that we are entering into digital age, digital economy. What consists in this ASEAN Digital Integration Framework? It's relevant to the 6 elements. For example, ASEAN need to harmonize ASEAN laws and regulation which can enhance, digital trade. For example, data protection to support digital trade and innovation. We also would like to see enhancement of human resource digital talent base. So we already have a framework from Singapore, but for Thailand, we want to see this framework put into action. So what we're going to discuss with other ASEAN countries is to draw up the action plan with a certain timeline and target. So we hope that we're going to produce, the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan by the end of this year, so that ASEAN countries can take action in order to prepare ourselves for digital economy. Other issue which I believe is also important is also the proposal by the ASEAN Business Council. This is number 3, the guidelines on skilled labor and professional services in order to prepare ASEAN for the 4th Industrial Revolution. You may already familiar with this. You may already know that in the 4th Industrial Revolution, the coming up of the robot, the AI, will be involved in the production process. Some people believe that this will replace, workers, people. But how can we, work with them? How can people also work with the AI and the robot? This is the proposal of ASEAN Business Council. They believe that the ASEAN has to prepare for that, and they're going to come out with a guideline. In the middle of this year, there's going to be a very big symposium organized by ABAC, ASEAN Business Council, on this issue, and I believe that they're going to talk to their counterpart, the Foreign Chamber of Commerce, perhaps to also involve you in this seminar. Besides that, on number 5, we also believe that it is important for MSME, micro and small medium enterprise, to also prepare themselves for the 4th IR. Because in Thailand, 90% of our businesses fall under MSME, which we call MISME. On the second pillar, it's regarding connectivity, partnership. What ASEAN has done is that we already reduced tariff among each other. 99% of tariff, custom duty among ASEAN is reduced to 0. Only some sensitive products. Some members may still preserve and have a small amount of tariff among ASEAN countries. But beyond that, we also would like to facilitate trade among ASEAN. One of the issues that ASEAN's come up with is if you can trade without tariff. However, sometimes the goods still stuck at the port because of some laws and regulations. How can we solve that? So among ASEAN, they come up with the idea of ASEAN single window, which means that any related document related to import and export have to be online, have to be electronic, have to be paperless in order to facilitate trade. They're going to start with a certificate of origin document, and ASEAN, 5 countries of ASEAN, which are Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, has already managed to link their certificate of origin document electronically among ASEAN. The 5 remaining countries, they have also to be linked to the other 5. So we hope that by the end of this year, ASEAN can link together. There is no need to use the certificate of origin in paper. This will be the beginning step, between ASEAN for the ASEAN single window, because if you do import and export, there are many documents that sometimes country needed. For example, SPS document, technical TBT document. So there are a lot of documents that we hope that among ASEAN in the future, we can do it electronically, so that it will save time waiting at the airport. And under our study, right now, it may take about a week to do import and export procedures, and we hope that under ASEAN single window, it can reduce to perhaps only 1 day or less than 1 day. Number 10 is also one of the important elements that Thailand with other ASEAN countries would like to see it achieved by the end of this year, which is the conclusion of the RCEP negotiations. The RCEP negotiations consist of 16 members, 10 ASEAN countries, plus Japan, Korea, China, India, Australia, and New Zealand. So we believe that this will be a big regional integration, big FTA, and it has been going on for almost 7 years. And the RCEP leaders believe that it is time that we try to conclude it. In the RCEP negotiating text, there are around 20 chapters. The RCEP members have managed to finish 7 chapters already, so still 13 chapters left. This year, as chairman of ASEAN, Thailand has already discussed with other ASEAN members. We have drawn up the work plan, and we believe that if we hold a meeting every month, it would be able to help us, achieve or conclude the RCEP negotiations by the end of this year. However, there are still some challenges for the RCEP negotiations because this year there's going to be election in Thailand. We heard that there's going to be election in Indonesia and Philippines, as well as in Australia and India. So this will also be a big challenge for the RCEP members. The last pillar is regarding sustainability. Thailand believes that even though we want to enhance our trade, we want to enhance our economic growth, but we cannot forget the most important part, which is sustainability. As you may already, you stay in Thailand and we faced with, the air pollution during the past month. So we believe that this is also the key, that we need to do it, sustainability. On this pillar, we have proposed, 3 issues that we hope to be achieved by the end of this year. The first one is regarding fishery, sustainable fishery. The second one is regarding sustainable capital market. And the last one is regarding the energy. So we believe that this is, all the important issue as Thailand is the chairperson of ASEAN this year. We hope to trying to work and cooperate with, other ASEAN members as well as our development partners. ASEAN has around 11 development partners. For example, US, EU, India, China, Japan. So this year, not only the ASEAN, 10 countries is going to meet, but we also have these 11 countries coming to Thailand at many levels, senior official, trade minister, as well as leader. The leader is going to come at the end of the year, around November. So this is going to happen in Thailand this year that I want to share with you. Now let me move to the issue that I have been invited today to speak with, which is on the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, which we call AFAS. In 2017, ASEAN services sector accounted for 50.9% of total GDP of ASEAN, which if we compare with the year 2005, at that time, services accounted for around 46.6%. So ASEAN services export and import also increased from US 113 billion to around, for the export, it's increased from 110 US billion to around 360 billion, in 2017. And for import, it has increased from around 140 billion to around 342 billion in 2017. So the share of intra-ASEAN in ASEAN trade in services remained relatively constant throughout the same period of around 17%. Singapore has the largest share of services sector, accounted for more than 2/3 of ASEAN total GDP, followed by Thailand. Thailand share is around 58%, and followed by Philippines, Malaysia. This is, I quoted from ASEAN Key Finger in 2018. So ASEAN recognized the importance of services. That is why, in 1995, the ASEAN has agreed to sign the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, or we call AFAS. There are three main objectives of AFAS. The first one is to enhance cooperation in services among ASEAN countries. We want to see the improvement of efficiency and competitiveness in services. The second objective is to try to substantially eliminate restriction to trade in services among ASEAN. And the third objective is to try to liberalize trade in services by expanding the depth and scope of liberalization beyond the GATT or WTO services agreement. So the AFAS principles also based on the GATT, WTO, that countries in ASEAN already commit. However, like I said, that AFAS aim to liberalize beyond what we commit in the GATT. So the AFAS therefore provide legal framework that enable member states to liberalize trade in services and improve market access to services suppliers based on the principle of progressive liberalizations. So therefore, after the signing of AFAS in 1995, several rounds of negotiations were conducted. Normally it took around 2 to 3 years for each round, and the result of negotiations are the package of schedule of commitment under AFAS. Up until now, we have 10 package of AFAS. AFAS package 1 to 7 focus on common sector under the GATT and allow foreign equity participation not existing 49% of registered capital. However, since the establishment of ASEAN Economic Community, the AEC, in 2015 and the AEC Blueprint in 2015, the ASEAN moved towards further free flow of trade in services. So from the AFAS package 8 to the current one, package 10, ASEAN has set a threshold or a target for services liberalization in each package. Package 8 started in 2010. So in AFAS package 8, allow more foreign equity participation at maximum of 70% in some sectors, such as health, telecommunication, and tourism. And still not existing 51% for, so this liberalization has not to exist 51% for at least 80% of service subsector. In package 9, member states decide to add logistic subsector for foreign service provider to be able to hold the registered capital not exceeding 70%, as well as set the target to eliminate restriction for at least 100 services subsector. So altogether, under package 10, we are now trying to eliminate restriction for at least 128 services subsector. So to date, ASEAN has concluded a total of 10 packages of scheduled commitment. In package 10, a target is to commit mode 1, cross-border supply, and mode 2, consumption abroad, with no limitations. And with regarding to mode 3, commercial presence, we will allow ASEAN services supplier to have at least 70% of equity participation in 128 services subsector. This will not include financial services and air transport services, which is under the purview of other ASEAN sectoral bodies. So ASEAN member state has already signed a protocol to implement the 10 package of commitment under AFAS last year in November in Singapore. The protocol to implement the 10 package of commitment will already enter into force on the 9th February this year. Up until now, there are 3 member states who notified to the ASEAN Secretariat that they can ratify this package 10. So they are Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. In the 10 package under AFAS, Thailand has committed to allow ASEAN investor and service provider to invest in Thailand by setting up a company with equity participation of up to 70% in 106 subsectors, which the 6 additional subsector has been introduced in package 10. And Thailand services commitment under AFAS are beyond GATS, WTO, both in terms of number of sectors and subsector, and in terms of equity participation in mode 3. So we allow 70% foreign participations. In the subsector, for example, business services, construction services, distribution services, higher education services, environmental services, hotel services, restaurant services, recreation services, and transport services. Besides the AFAS, I also would like to perhaps inform you about other important issue that has been discussed in ASEAN, which is the Mutual Recognition Arrangement, or the MRA. Besides liberalization on trade services among ASEAN, ASEAN also recognized the importance of having Mutual Recognition Arrangement, or MRA, in order to facilitate the flow of professional services under AFAS. We believe that the MRA would help facilitate trade in services by recognizing among ASEAN member states for professionals who are authorized, licensed, or certified by the respective authorities within the framework of MRA. So the MRA are not expected to override local laws, but instead the agreement are applicable only in accordance with domestic law and regulations. To date, ASEAN has concluded and signed MRA in 7 professional services, such as engineers, nurses, architects, medical practitioners, dental practitioners, accountants, and tourism professionals. And the last one, surveyors. These are under ASEAN framework to be upgraded to MRA very soon. So it means that under this 7 professional, ASEAN has already agreed that at least they can accept the qualification of each other. For example, under engineer, because 10 ASEAN countries may have different format of education or qualification, but under MRA we believe that if engineer which is qualified under one country in ASEAN, it can be also accepted as a condition in other ASEAN countries. However, in order to enter into the countries and to work, you still need to apply domestic laws and regulations. Besides the issue of MRA, ASEAN has also recently been working on the new agreement, which we call ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement, the so-called ANTISA. ANTISA is the next important step for ASEAN to enhance trade in services in the region. The objective of ANTISA are to strengthen economic linkages and provide greater opportunity for economic development, increase trade and investment in the area of services, and also try to reduce barriers to trade and investment in services. ANTISA covers 6 sections, namely, in the agreement of ANTISA, we have a general provision which consists of objective and scope. We have obligation and discipline. For example, we also follow GATT, National Treatment, Most Favored Nation, MFN. We also discuss about reservations because some of the services subsector, maybe ASEAN still want to make reservations. We also discuss about regulatory discipline, for example, transparency, domestic regulations. We also talk about cooperation, technical assistance, private sector engagement, and we also set up institutional mechanism, review chapter, dispute settlement chapter in the ANTISA. So we believe that ANTISA introduced a new method of making commitment in ASEAN. The ANTISA will already conclude in November last year in Singapore and expected to be signed in April this year in Thailand, when we going to have the ASEAN Economic Minister meeting in Phuket in April. So this is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions that you want to ask regarding to ASEAN or services agreement of ASEAN, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to ask one about education.
Yes.
One of the things that we were talking about here earlier on, one of the things we were talking about was education in Thailand. But there is, across ASEAN and beyond, an education problem. Can you see a point where, for example, there would be a free exchange of, or the ability to exchange teachers between different countries? There are, for example, in the Philippines, many people who have high skills in English language, and they would be useful in terms of helping the development in other countries. Is that part of the agenda for ASEAN moving forward?
For higher education, it's the sector that we discuss in the AFAS, that we can allow foreign participation. I mean, foreign is mean other ASEAN country participation, 70% equity. But your question is regarding to can other higher education or teacher of other ASEAN come and work in Thailand. At present, I have already shown you the MRA that we've done among ASEAN. This MRA hasn't yet include higher education profession like teachers. We can discuss it in the future, but right now it's still under each domestic law and regulations.
Thank you.
Please.
name is Cleveland English, and I'm with Archons Design Consultants. We're industrial architects. We design, build factories. My question is about the sharing of services between the ASEAN countries. One of the roadblocks, or one of the challenges rather, that we're having is that we have large-scale industrial clients. They'll build factories, they'll build warehouses here in Thailand, and they would like to have they'd like to retain our expertise when they open up again in Vietnam, when they open in Malaysia. But what happens is, because even though our architects, veteran architects, 30 years here in Thailand, their qualifications aren't sufficient to work in Vietnam. So what ends up happening, we would do the work, and then a Vietnamese architect who basically gets paid to sign a signature on our drawings. Is there anything in the framework that could change that in the future? That would allow us to, if we show our credentials from Thailand, to be able to work in any of the Asian member states?
Thank you for your question. For the framework, it's covered mode 1, 2, and 3. But your question is may regarding to the movement of natural persons, your question is regarding how can other country, ASEAN country, utilize the expertise that's already worked in Thailand, right?
I'm sorry, please let me clarify. It doesn't have to be the movement of natural persons. So for example, I wouldn't have to always go and be on the ground at the site, but rather just the service, the design service. So they could send us all the site surveys and the pictures, and we could design from our office here, right? And sign off on it, right? But we can't sign off on it for any country outside of Thailand. So would the transfer of service, not so much the transfer of people, be effective?
I have to consult with my expert. She has to check so that I can give you the right information. I don't want to give you the wrong information.
I'm sorry if it's quite niche. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Thank you.
Actually, if I could just follow up on that one, perhaps. DWP, AUSCHAM, and we have architects in several countries. And look at John Pollard, got similar issues. You mentioned about mutual recognition of certifications. So yes, our architects, engineers, doctors can be registered, but you also mentioned that the local laws still apply.
Yes.
And that means that you must be a Siamese registered architect to sign, or a Siamese structural engineer to sign. So whilst we have mutual recognition, that's one part. Implementation, which is very ASEAN, is the issue. Can we sign? Yes, you recognise my degree, I am an architect, but I still can't sign in Vietnam because I'm not actually registered there, and they won't let me register there, even though they recognise my qualification. So again, it comes down to actual implementation. So perhaps that's precisely okay, fine. And I think that's the issue when you talk about doctors and nurses and so on as well. That whilst they may recognise it, it's actually under local law can be practiced. For instance, to be a medical doctor here, you must take the exam in Thai. Well, good luck. It's not going to happen if you're from Singapore or from Philippines. So that is to me detrimental to the actual aim that we're trying to achieve, perhaps with this movement.
Thank you. Take note of that. But as you explained, we have a basket of MRA, but local laws and regulations still apply.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Pinyapa, and actually it's the same question as Vincent, that he mentioned it before in terms of implementation. So when you mentioned about AFAS, that I think it's version 8, if I recall correctly, that you mentioned it, that you give a bit more flexibility for the foreign investor who came from ASEAN countries to invest some particular type of business which you allow them to hold the shares more than 49%. For me, I have some curious about the tourism business in Thailand. So I believe many of you might know that it's kind of pretty restricted business here, and even based on the AFAS or ASEAN law, you might allow them to come here to invest more, let's say more than 49%. But on the other hand, if you want to apply for the license, the law itself, it doesn't allow you to apply for it. So I'm just a bit like curious how it would be, or what would be the direction or solution on that.
I know that this is one of the challenge. We have been meeting with a number of foreign chamber of commerce, and this issue has been raised. But perhaps there's progressive liberalization, because among ASEAN we have agreed in AFAS to increase foreign equity participation. But regarding the condition license that you mentioned, up until now in ASEAN, it's still depending on member countries. However, please do not forget that in ASEAN, we also now enter into negotiations, the FTA negotiations, with other countries like in ASEAN, and perhaps it's depend on each ASEAN country. For Thailand, in the future, we may also enter into these bilateral FTA negotiations. So I believe that perhaps the liberalize of the condition that you mentioned maybe move a bit slow in ASEAN. Maybe we may have to see it in other bilateral FTA negotiation. Sorry to frankly say to you on this. But however, I believe that the role of my department, Ministry of Commerce, we also try to discuss with our stakeholder, because I mentioned to them that already, market access in goods. Now, it's time that Thailand not only export products overseas, we also export services overseas. So you have to think beyond that. We have to also think of, discussing more liberalized in investment, more liberalized in services. Because if we want the other trading partner to open, market for us, we also have to prepare, for ourselves to be able to discuss and exchange with them. So this is what I can share with you. Please.
I didn't really get the connection between AFAS and ATISA. So is ATISA replacing the framework agreement?
Yes. AFAS actually it's begin very early in 1995 when we just have WTO GATT. So at that time it's only a framework, not agreement. Then ASEAN agreed to progressively liberalize. They have discussed until so far now, from 1995 until now, and they believe that it's time that we should draw up our own agreement. So right now we have an ANTISA, which ASEAN plan to ratify. Some countries have to ratify very soon.
Hi, Danny Hales, Cataclean Global here. I meet with a lot of companies who have large fleets, haulage fleets and buses, that kind of thing, across ASEAN markets, mainly on emissions reduction. And you mentioned at the beginning that there was a focus on sustainability, primarily with fisheries, biofuels and capital. How much discussion is there in place in actually enforcing existing legislation on emissions? When I meet with companies and we discuss, how much emissions have been put out there by these fleets, yes, they are acknowledging it, but they're saying, well, we don't do anything because the legislation isn't enforced. So rarely do we get anybody coming and checking what we do in terms of emissions in vehicles. And that seems to be systematic across all ASEAN nations that I've dealt with. what level of discussions have there been in terms of making emissions a fairly top-end focus?
On this part, in the deliverable that I show you on screen, because Ministry of Commerce, we are the focal point of economic pillars. These 13 elements come from various ministries. With regarding to the issue of energy, it's the Ministry of Energy who proposed that. But you talk about emission, so it will also involve with the Ministry of Natural Resources. I believe right now we haven't come at that stage, but ASEAN, beyond ASEAN, some member of ASEAN also member of some convention, UN convention, for example, the Convention on Climate Change, trying to reduce, the emission that can improve, the climate. This will be, some, taking some time for discussion among ASEAN, but we haven't yet arrived on how to, harmonize and come up with a number.
I think a lot of most of the countries, the legislation is actually there. It exists and it's applicable, and it's relevant immediately and could be fairly easily executed. It's more of it's not been. And if actually, I think if it were put as a point of discussion, it probably wouldn't actually take that long to execute, in all honesty, because the legislation's there and it's fairly systematic across all of the.
Thank you. I think I agree with you because, like the air pollution that happened in ASEAN countries.
Thank you.
But sorry, some of this issue is, beyond Ministry of Commerce. I may not be able to provide you the detailed information.
Hi, my name is Tanva. I'm from Grand Thornton. I just have one question relating to the ATISA. In your slide, you mentioned that there would be an MFN granted to all the ASEAN members. I'm wondering what is the mechanism for that in terms of how does that operate? Because most favored nation, if I apply the